Okay? All right. We have a guest speaker today. You probably noticed this big guy with red hair who's been hanging around here since the beginning of school. This is Brian Marlborough. He will tell you more about himself and his story, so I'll be quiet. And it is early, but go ahead and give him a nice, warm round of thanks for the
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so I know most of you. For those of you who don't know me, so my name is Brian. I have a gym, Complete Strength, here in Lee Summit. It's actually over by Lee Summit North High. It's across the street from North. I work with young athletes from middle school all the way up through college. I've got a few, I think I have 3 professional athletes right now, soccer and 2 football guys, but mostly high schoolers is mostly what I work with. And I wanted to kind of share my journey of how I got here, both in faith and in business in a sense. So I began playing football when I was probably 8 or 9, I think. I started playing quarterback, and I did that all the way through middle school, through high school. I got into high school, and that experience started turning into, you know what, I think I'm pretty good at this. I was pretty good at being a quarterback and having a lot of success with that, but then also my identity was wrapped up in that. And so it wasn't a separation. I wasn't a Christian kid. I didn't go to church. I wasn't involved in youth programs. I just had football. So when I say my whole identity was wrapped up in football, that's really what it is. That's pretty much all I thought I had in life. And when I got to kind of my senior season, we went 5-5. We didn't do great. A lot of expectations that I had, that we had as a team, went down. As a result, a lot of the recruiting expectations that I had kind of went away, and I had to settle what I thought was a lesser scholarship offer. And I went to a school that I didn't really want to go to, just because I thought that was the only thing I could do. So during that experience, my freshman year there, I developed kind of a real hate for just football and life itself, because my identity being wrapped up in supposed to be a successful path toward wherever it led, toward big college or toward the NFL or getting paid or something, but it wasn't working out the way I thought it was supposed to. And so that kind of started to crash around me. So I decided to walk away from football, and I transferred schools. I went to William Jewell up in Liberty, Missouri, which it was formerly a Baptist affiliated school, but it's still kind of known as a Christian school. And so I went there, and down the road I realized I really feel like that's where God was leading me to, because he wanted something more for me and he wanted to reveal himself to me. But I went there at that time just simply because I had a couple friends that went there, and it was close by the home. I grew up in Raytown, so it was close by. And when I got there, I started meeting some real Christian people, and I met some close friends in the dorms that I became really close with, and they started to reveal and show this Jesus to me, and they showed a real love to me. And I started to kind of understand that there was much more to life than things that we can get wrapped up in what we think we might be good at, even though there are gifts, like physical gifts, as for me it was playing football. And began to realize that identity that I thought I had, it was much bigger. It could be much bigger than that simple, small little football character that I grew up with. After college, then I started to kind of realize my calling, and God was really leading me toward working with young athletes and working with other athletes, and maybe sharing my story with them, or maybe just sharing the experiences that I had along with the education that I had to train athletes for athletic performance. And so I started my gym in 2009 with the idea that I really wanted to reach younger people who were in the same place that I was at that time, and to try to get them on the right path, not only for their sport or maybe their activity, maybe it's not necessarily a sport, but also to try and help them grow in their spiritual and emotional life, so that way they understand that. So like for you guys here, you guys understand that your identity isn't wrapped up in just the sport you play, or the activity that you're good at, or the group that you're involved with. Maybe you're a musician, or maybe you're an artist. Like, that's not all of your identity. It's not all wrapped up into that one thing that you're good at. We have a lot of different physical gifts, and we also have a lot of spiritual gifts that God gives us in order to not only follow him and serve him, but also serve others and just kind of share his message with through those gifts. eventually, I came back to football. So after starting my gym, I started becoming a Jesus follower. I started to get into the Bible and started to have a better core group of Christian friends, and I was growing spiritually in my faith. And after a couple years, this was back in 2011 or so, I kind of wanted to get back into football because that's something I've always had a passion for, and something I've always just loved playing. And so I started to kind of get back into that. I played with a semi-pro team. It was kind of a small commitment for me, and I started to realize that on my journey where I'd come from, I was finally now at a point where I say that I could coexist. I could coexist with my Christian life with the football life, and they could come together and they could still kind of work as one. And so that was a big thing for me to be able, because I wanted to give up football for, I don't want to say give up for the Christian life, but in a sense, I wanted to kind of walk away from the football world and my identity as a football player to become a Christian guy. And then down the road, I wanted to kind of merge those two together again. And it finally became a time where maybe just my heart was in the right place, or I feel like God just gave me the strength and the ability and the courage to actually merge those two together. So as I got back into it, now I started to realize that the sport or any other type of activity, just like my gym is for me, it's just a platform and it's an avenue to be able to serve people and to be able to share Jesus' message. And especially in a close grip community like a sport team, it's a very unique opportunity to share a real message of Jesus with people, because your day-to-day activities, you're practicing, you're playing, you're working with people, and it's just a great opportunity to share the gospel and to share the love of Jesus with people that you're becoming close to. So it kind of brings me, I put together a couple questions. And number one being, how can you glorify Jesus through your sport, hobby, or activity? So when we talk about, I guess the first thing is like, how do we glorify Jesus anyway? But we can glorify him in so many different ways, but I would say number one is to understand that Jesus is overall. So Jesus has given us everything that we have in this world and in this life. So you can glorify him by just accepting that, embracing that, and then doing your all with that, what you have, and in that time. So I use my example as, don't necessarily turn away from the things that he's given you, but understand how to embrace those and how to use those to glorify him, and do that with all of the ability that you have. And that's how we can glorify him, through those activities. And then my second question is, what are your spiritual gifts? So Romans 12 and 6 through 8, it talks about that we all have spiritual gifts according to the grace given to each of us. So it gives a couple of examples. I mean, if your gift is teaching, then go and teach. If it's leading, then go and lead and do it diligently. And we have spiritual gifts that God gives us in order to be able to reach people and to be able to enhance the kingdom and to bring other people, other followers to him. So try to figure out, I always like to say, try to figure out what are those spiritual gifts that you have that God's given you, and how can you use those in order to just reach other people and to share the message to other people. And then my third question, how can we compete hard in following Jesus? The message of the gospel. So it brings me, a couple of scriptures is 1 Corinthians 9:24, where Paul's talking about, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it. So I think that's really cool, because we relate that to, okay, yeah, racing, or we competing, somebody wins, one person wins the prize. But what he's talking about, run that you may obtain it, run so that you obtain the prize of Christ. So if Jesus is the goal, that's the race that we're running towards. So if you're competing, compete hard to run toward Jesus. And compete hard in your daily walk to pray and to read your Bible and to grow as a Christian and to be around other Christians. Like, compete hard in that. We want to compete hard in our sports and in our activities, and we want to get better at all these other things. But then sometimes it's easy for our Christian walk to become, well, yeah, I didn't really pray today, or I read my Bible last week or something. I'm not really into it right now. But instead, flip that and compete hard in being a Christian in your Christian walk. That's something that it's kind of countercultural too, but it's kind of hard in our society with so many things that we have going on around us and so many things that pull our attention away. And then Acts 20:24, but do not account my life of any value nor as precious to myself, if only I may finish my course in the ministry that I received from the Lord Jesus to testify to the gospel of the grace of God. So now there in Acts, Paul's talking about that, his life is, don't give him any credit, or don't count his life as anything more than just that he competed hard, and he finished the race, and he finished his course to just share the message of Jesus, that's what God gave him to do. And he was just simply stating that, give him the credit and give him the recognition for simply finishing that race. And that's something that I want all of us to aspire to, as well as we compete in that journey and compete in that race to follow Jesus and to know Jesus and to become a disciple of his and to become just a stronger Christian in your walk. But we want to finish that race ultimately to meet Jesus and to please Jesus. And there's that common saying that when we get to heaven or when you die and then God says, well done, my good and faithful servant, that's what we all want. That's finishing the race. And we do that with joy, but we want to compete in that. So I think that's my big message, is that to really compete for that. And then my fourth question would be, how can you live unashamed in life? And that's away from church and away from your youth group or away from this group in here. How can you live unashamed of the gospel? So that's Romans 1:16 is, I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes. And so how can we live unashamed when we leave this room right here and we leave this group, and when you go out into the school, into your normal life throughout the day? How can you be unashamed of the gospel? And if you're unashamed, if you're not ashamed of the gospel, then you're going to let that shine through you, and you're going to tell people about that. You're going to be open, you're going to be encouraging, and you're going to just be so excited about that, just like you are with your other talents and your other sports and activities and things that you're involved in. You're going to want to share that with people. That's how we can live unashamed, and make sure we need to get out of. When James was here, I thought that was awesome what he's doing with his missionary life and moving his family to the Middle East. But that's living unashamed of the gospel in the full extent. He's not ashamed of any part of Jesus' message. He's not ashamed of the Bible. He's not ashamed of any part of the gospel for the sake of everyone in the world, no matter where they are or who they are or where they come from. So for you guys here, that's as simple as the people sitting next to you in class throughout the rest of the day, or the other friends and the family members that you have close with you in your life. And then when you get into your sport, your activity, your club, your different groups that you're in, how can you live unashamed in those settings as well? And I don't want you to just make it just a church thing or just a youth group thing or just a Titan Student Fellowship thing where you're here. Take it with you everywhere else where you're outside of here too, and outside of church, and really lived unashamed of that gospel, and let that shine through you so you can encourage people and they can see that there's something really special about following Jesus. Because as most of us in here hopefully know, there is something really special about following Jesus, and it's life-changing stuff. And so, yeah. Do we have little handouts for the?
We're actually going to write them down.
Okay, that'll work.
Break up a little bit and talk
That'll
about
work.
those very questions.
Yeah. So I wanted to kind of bring some of those questions for you guys. Anybody have any questions for me, I guess, while I'm here? Is anybody awake enough to ask a question?